Thanks, Judith. This basically is an example of the case report in its current appearance, which has been evolving, and we think we're pretty much onto it as far as the final version, and it's basically modelled on the style that many of our IACLE reports are carrying out. Now, you'll notice that this is actually being run in the browser. It started life as a PowerPoint presentation, for better or for worse. Microsoft is not my favourite company, MicroLimp as I prefer to call them. We've actually converted it to Flash using some Russian software called iSpring Pro. There's also iSpring Presenter as well, but we're using iSpring Pro because I studied some of the free ones, some of the commercial ones, of which iSpring Pro is an example, and this one gave the best results. One of the reasons we convert it to Flash is because in PowerPoint, if you click anywhere in the page in PowerPoint, it advances to the next slide. And you will see that we are asking multiple choice questions of the viewer in this particular situation, and basically you cannot have the next slide being accidentally given, because it's either going to give them the right answer or give them one of the distractors, which then reduces the chances of them getting it wrong. So we have to provide in the presentation all navigation keys, and on the front here there in fact is only one navigation key. You can go forwards and nowhere else. This is a tremendous advantage to us, but it's also a disadvantage in that if you're not paying attention and you've got infinite loops, the viewer can go around and around and around to get nowhere because you haven't actually thought the way through, or your quality control wasn't adequate. So we go to the next page, and this was the result of our presentation of this to our industry sponsors in Anaheim, and they decided they'd like their sponsorship acknowledged up the front instead of the second last slide. Jane is smiling. So the Pied Piper gets their way. Now, if you look at the navigation down the bottom, there are only three ways out of this slide. You can go backwards, you can go forwards, or you can go to the table of contents. So I'm in fact going to go forwards, and then we've got a copyright notice, and we then explain the actual format being used. Basically, we have arrows for forwards, backwards, and whatever. Think of the VCR model, it's the way it's done. And the table of contents is pretty straightforward. Down the bottom here we have some information which relates to either the IACLE contact lens course or standard textbooks, or in some cases the URLs of online resources, particularly for some diagrams or photographs that we don't have copyright access to. The next one also shows where this came from. This was a particular series of case reports presented in Hyderabad 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And we try to give due acknowledgement to whomever. We also use the SOAP format, which I think is bigger in North America than it is here, and far be it from me to be claiming to be a great sponsor of North American isms. And you'll find that the spelling in this generally follows the shorter Oxford English Dictionary 1993. Americans speak American, English speak English. We use English. So we're using the SOAP format, and this little indicator up in the corner here indicates the slide's position in the SOAP scheme of things. In some cases it might be both, because there's information of a dual nature. So then you come to case reports with a table of contents. Now, you'll notice that the table of contents is missing. So if we go to the previous one and press table of contents, we can go to the table of contents. And that table of contents is available down throughout the whole presentation, so you can go back from wherever. So let's say we want to do the first case. We automatically start the video. The really big joke, this is a typical Microsoft issue, the actual file that this is taken from does not play in my PowerPoint. I've converted it to an ASF file using a free converter called Super, a peculiar product, but it works very, very well. It converts just about every form of video to every other form of video and audio. There's all sorts of options. But in the Flash version, it plays nicely. This one here is a manual instigation, and if you've got a good enough computer, you can actually have both of them going at the same time. But we've decided to automatically start the first image, and the second image is a manual invocation. So then it gives you some scenario, then it starts posing the questions. I don't even know what this is about. sensitivity of lens care products. Okay, so let's say we try this one. Okay, now I got it right. Strange that I wrote it as well. It gives you two options. You can either move ahead, which is the original intention. We also allow you to go back to where we were to have a look at what the distractors. Okay, we have a correct answer and 3 distractors, what the distractors were. So let's say we decided it was a concretion. It'll tell you that it's incorrect, and if there are references or other materials, it'll give you those, and it will tell you briefly. This is not trying to be a complete encyclopedia of knowledge. It'll tell you basically why it is incorrect. So back to where we were, we got it correct the first time, and we move on. So again, we have a video. Anybody from Canada might recognise the person because this actually came from our Canadian colleagues. And so on. So we've got videos, we've got stills, and this one in fact is from the contact lens course. And this basically encapsulates, and you'll notice up the top, that we have subjective and objective information on this particular slide. So we are tracking up here all the time as to where you are in the SOAP scheme of things. Now you don't have to use SOAP. You can use anything you like. You can ignore it completely. But this was one of the approaches that seemed to have some tenure. So if we go to the final question, I think this was from memory, excessively tight. And by the time you come to the end, it'll give you the option to replay. But basically, the only navigation buttons possible are the ones that we supply. If you're in PowerPoint, every time you hit the screen anywhere, it advances to the next slide. That doesn't suit our particular purposes. So this is the approach that we've taken, and if you go to replay, it actually takes you all the way back to the first case. Now, we actually have 15 3/4 slide case reports completed, but only 3 of them currently are in the final livery. And we also have some issues about Office 2003 versus Office 2007 with the conversion utility. So the released product will be a 2007 throughout presentation to try and cut down the prospects of any difficulties. The applications for this could be anywhere from giving it to students so they could do it themselves, could be used as a basis for a tutorial, could be used as a warm-up for a lecture, or it could be given as a post-lecture assessment of how much knowledge has been imparted if the case report relates very, very closely to the lecture topic. So we are not dictating how to use it, we are suggesting some of the possibilities, and it's a resource which has utility. How it's used is largely up to your circumstances, your institution's circumstances, or your country's requirements. Okay. Yo.
Will we be allowed to put it on a sort of password-protected part of the website?
I'm not sure we've given any thought to that, actually.
It's obviously being in the flash media is quite a good way of doing that. I mean, instead of then having lots of this that students need to borrow and give them, we'd love to be able to give them access, but obviously, you know.
Okay. The way iSpring Pro divides this up, and there's an option, you can make it as one lumpy file, which would be quite large, or as I choose to do, it actually creates a separate related data file where all the FLV files are for the videos. But theoretically, they can be taken away as a separate item. So there's a security issue there, and maybe the all-in-one file would be a better option under those circumstances. But to be honest, you're thinking ahead of where we are at with the project. In fact, next week, I'm going to the US to the IACLE meeting with Jan Jerkis, who spent some of her sabbatical with me last year working on some of these case reports. And we are making a pitch to the IACLE members to provide us with their raw materials, because they don't have any permanent staffing structure to do this sort of thing, but they are keen to be helpful. So we're making a pitch to get their materials. We're also contemplating other organisations such as the American Academy, BCLA, and these other organisations that have fellowships that have all sorts of materials coming in. And it's amazing what you can, I wouldn't say a silk purse from sow's ear, but you can get in a relatively small amount of information on a case and you can embellish it greatly. You can get it's almost like fractals if you really let it go. You can get an enormous amount. But we figure that somewhere around 50 slides total is about the limit. Otherwise, it just bogs down. We had some very lengthy ones. In fact, even this one is too long, but it covers about 5 or 6 miscellaneous cases, which is generally not the style. Most of our cases are single theme.
I mean, it's a great resource, and one of the advantages we do a lot of our lectures now in Flash is that the students can't download it, so it's not like how.
That was one of the attractions to us as well.
And particularly when you've got visiting lecturers that are quite rightly precious about their material.
Yes.
To be able to say this isn't a format that people can't download unless we choose to give them a PDF that they can't then tinker with.
The PDFs don't really lend themselves to this particular application because the animations. In fact, if I was a big VBA, I'm not, I would have studiously avoided it. In fact, if I was a VBA programmer, I'm sure I could actually do some sort of assessment module built in the background so that you actually come up with a quiz result at the end as well. But I don't have the knowledge, and whilst we could pay somebody to do it, it would be a large and expensive project, and we're not going there at this point in time. Any other questions?
I'd like to add you that most of the references go back to the contact lens modules of IACLE, so if there's any explanation, it's actually referenced into the module as well, so students can actually go back to the module.
Lewis, I think it's a thing of beauty.
I can't claim anything about the beauty part of it, to be honest.
But it's so pleasing to look at. You know, it's,
Okay, so the people who are responsible for the colour scheme can... Every time our graphics department sees me coming, they duck a mile because they know that the colours are going to be awful, the fonts are going to be numerous and awful, and the layout is going to be a dog's body from a sort of a techno geek type person rather than an artsy fartsy. So I stay right out of it. I make no claims about the appearance, so your comments will be appreciated elsewhere. Okay, thank you.